Welcome, everyone. Good morning, noon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I am Bushra Anjum, and I'm the host for the ACM-W Celebrating Technology Leaders web series. This series is designed to demystify various career options. In each episode, we invite women leaders who have been successfully architecting their careers in computing. Today, we have a wonderful panel for you focusing on technical returnships for women. A few logistical reminders first. I will be facilitating the discussion for the first 45 minutes. The final 15 minutes are for you to ask any questions to our panelists. You can do so by typing them into the Q&A widget and clicking submit. Feel free to write in and send your questions throughout the discussion. Also, on the bottom panel, you will find a number of social widgets, including Twitter and sharing apps. We encourage you to share any nuggets you find useful in this discussion with your social networks. Thank you for spending the next hour with us here. We will make every effort to make it worth your while. Let's start. In 2008, Goldman Sachs coined a term, returnships, a program to help female professionals restart their careers after an extended absence from work. So what are returnships? Organizations hire women who want to relaunch their careers after a long break and provide them with training and mentoring. Most, if not all, of the returnships turn into a full-time job offer. The gaps in the resume are scary. Also, the longer you are out of the job market, the harder it gets to get back in. And the hardest part is not what is out there. It is mostly what's in there, what you feel internally. The fear, the worry, sometimes shame, confidence loss. So how do you take that first step? What has been the journeys of some of the returners like? And also, really, what's in it for the organizations? We have a great panel today that will help us answer some of these questions. We have Christine Winston, Vice President of Path Forward, a nonprofit organization that has helped employers implement successful return-to-work programs. Christy Lamar, Managing Director, Monitor Deloitte, and she leads the Women in Tech program for Deloitte's U.S. firms. Mariam Shabir, a returner, Business Development Consultant at Cybrid MD, and she successfully returned to work after a 10-year break. Josie McManus, a software engineer at VMware, also a returner and successfully returned back to work after a 6-year break. So let's learn more about them from them. So panelists, how did your unique personal background, interests, and career aspirations lead you to where you are today? We can start with Christine.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Christine Winston, and I head up program development at Path Forward. Path Forward is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to help people who've taken breaks from their careers get back into the paid workforce. And we do that primarily by working with employers to help them structure, implement, and run these paid return-to-work programs or returnships that give an on-ramp back into the workforce for people who've taken breaks. And you know, this mission speaks to me very personally because I'm a returner myself. I had a 15-year career at companies large and small, spanning all aspects of company operations, from marketing and communications to strategy and business development. And my last job prior to my break was as a vice president of finance. So I had a pretty broad experience set and felt like I had gotten my MBA while working in many ways. But after the birth of my second son, I decided I needed to take a break from my career. Life had gotten a lot more complicated. And like so many women, particularly in the last 18 months, I felt it was the best decision for my family. But also, like many returners, the 2-year break I thought I was about to go take turned into a 9-year break. And when I was trying to come back, I faced all those problems in here that Bushra was just alluding to, right? All that imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, the wondering whether my skills would still be current enough, whether I could learn the way that I learned before, all of those things that I think are really common to people who are looking to go back in, despite having 15 years of really great experience and a strong network. I was very fortunate that through my network, I heard about this nonprofit that was getting started to help create on-ramps for women back to the workforce. And I actually restarted my career as the second employee for Path Forward and starting this particular organization. So it's quite a poetic return to work for me, in that I get to help other people who are in the same situation that I found myself in. So that's it for me. I'll pass it to Christy.
Thanks, Christine. So I have a little bit of a different path, if you will. I've been with Deloitte for almost 15 or 16 years. I lose count. But if you do the math on that, I have had my 2 children since I've been with the firm. And being with a large professional services organization and the confluence of being a technologist, I didn't see a lot of women, frankly, having children, right? And so I had a lot of anxiety around coming back to work. Deloitte has a very generous parental leave policy, but I felt like I was a bit of an anomaly, right? That I could have these 2 little tiny people and still have this career. And I knew that I had an opportunity, right? And I didn't want myself to feel like this anomaly. I also didn't want others to, once they get through the anomaly stage, to not feel like they were supported and there weren't, beyond programs, just institutional support for women. And it's ultimately evolved for that. And it's being able to lead a number of things within the firm. I know that we have, as a society, a tremendous opportunity in the time that we're living, especially in the technology space, as well as having, this moment in time where people are returning to the workforce for a variety of reasons, whether COVID took them out or something else. Like, let's use this moment that we're living through to create new outcomes for people and, create new steps on a journey. So I feel really, really lucky. Again, I feel like this poster child for programs, but the reality is I think that things are becoming far more ubiquitous, but not enough. So that's what our conversation's about, right? So Josie, I'll pass it over to you if that works.
Yes, sure. So I'm Josie McManus. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I graduated from the University of Florida with a computer engineering degree. And the last summer I graduated, I got an internship at IBM, and I continued working with them through my last semester in college. And then I was hired full time. So it was great because I already knew the project and the people. So it was really an easy transition. I was also very fortunate to have really good people in my team. And one of them had over 100 patents, and he got me really interested in that. So I started working with creating brainstorm sessions and brown bags for creating patents. So that was kind of a passion of mine. So my work was mainly writing backend code in Java. And then about 9 years later, I became a mom and decided I wanted to stay home. I did that for about 6 years, and then I was ready to re-enter. And now I work at VMware. I am also mentoring a few individuals who are going through the same program that I did. So it's full circle for me. And I know the journey can be a little bit scary, but it's been worth it. Miriam, pass it over to you.
Thank you. So I am Miriam Shabir. Tell you about myself and a little background on how I ended up here. I'm the youngest in my family, and I was the only girl with 3 brothers. So growing up, I developed this interest in by watching my brothers. I developed an interest in engineering and sports. That led me to pursue my degree in engineering. So I did my bachelor's in communication systems engineering from NASP, Pakistan. And even during that time, my interest in sports continued, and I, did my engineering degree and played sports and won a number of medals in that. But after graduation, I joined Ericsson Pakistan in the pre-sales team. I loved my work there. It involved customer dealings, presenting, to the customer, giving demos to them. So I worked there for about 2.5 years, and then I got married and I got relocated. Then I had to take a break to, start my family and raise my kids. And then I got back to my work after a big break of 10 years. And currently I'm working as a business development consultant at Celebrating.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for sharing about your background. So, of course, we have tons of questions for all the panelists, but I know that a lot of people here would really want to learn more about the experience of the returners. How was the journey back? How did you even know that there is something that you should pursue? And what were some of the challenges there? Miriam, would you like to continue with your story? Tell us, how was it?
Yeah, sure. So after my kids started school, I aspired to get back to work, but I didn't know what my options were. I was not aware of the returnship programs either. I thought that either I have to go back to school, I have to take some online course or do some certification maybe, and then, look for some entry-level roles to re-enter the workforce. So I approached an old friend of mine for advice in this time. So Homa Hamid is an old friend who is also the co-founder of Pakistani Women in Computing. It's a non-profit organization, PWIC. That moment turned out to be the game changer for me, really, because she became my mentor, and then she guided me every step of the way. She introduced me to, different pathways, possible pathways to return to work. That is where she mentioned returnships to me. And so the path that I took was that I worked on my resume, I worked on my interview skills, and then I started shortlisting positions that would work for me and started exploring job opportunities within my network, through my network. So after a few months of effort, I, with the help of my mentor, we were able to find a sponsor, Arthur Imran, and it was through him that I got a returnship opportunity at CyberMD. It's a medical billing company that provides revenue cycle management, front office services, and all that, and I worked there as a business development consultant. So in my case, it became possible with some effort and commitment that I put in, but along with mentoring and sponsorship and engaging in my network, it was this whole thing that enabled my way back to work. So you're talking about the company and all that. So the company and team that I work with are very, very supportive, and they fully understand my need to learn and grow. So it was a gradual process with the team, and they only gave me the workload when I was, really ready for it. And my manager made sure that I understand the learning process, and I go through the whole work and the processes gradually. I was nervous initially because it was after a huge break, but having a supportive team who understands your need makes a huge difference.
Having a supportive team does make a huge difference, of course, in regular jobs as well, but especially for a returnship experience. Josie, how about your story?
Yeah, to be honest, kind of like Mariam, I did not know about returnship concept. I was just trying to get back to work. And I did think that I had to maybe take courses and go back to school and, that kind of thing. So I started applying for jobs, and it became quickly, I noticed that it was kind of hard. People wanted to know about the gap. The positions were for people who were ready to code and jump in, which I wasn't ready for that. And I'll tell you a story. The first time I did a Blackboard interview, I noticed I was really super slow, and the interviewer was a bit frustrated with me. So I tried to remain calm and just get through it. The hour was up, and then I was waiting, and the hiring manager stopped by to tell me that I didn't qualify. So he rushed me out of the building, and I was in my car thinking, how am I ever going to do this? Do I need to change careers? This seems impossible. But a few weeks later, I met someone at a Denver Startup Week, And she listened to my story and told me about Path Forward and asked me to read it. So I read it, and that's how I came to know. And this was before the pandemic. So the concept was really new to me, but I started applying at jobs, and immediately it was different than what I had been experiencing. I got support right away from the recruiter. They knew exactly where I was. They understood that the interviews were made for people who were returning, and they weren't easy, but the expectations were just different. What I did also, as Marianne did, is that I got mentors at that time, and those mentors helped me focus on what I should study and what I should do for my project, and kind of reviewed it and helped me with that. So I guess the most challenging part of the process was just getting out of my head. I wanted to write code faster and better, but the last time I had written code, it was in Java 7, and they were working on 14 with Kotlin, which I had no idea. So there were like 100 new VMware terms that I had to learn. So I was overwhelmed, and I doubted myself, and my mentor suggested that I focus on the skills that I already had as my tech skills ramped up. So focus on communication, on organization, and gathering of information. So once I started doing that and setting my expectations for myself, things just started falling into place. I was asking the right questions, and I was offering solutions that I couldn't implement, but there were still solutions. So that's when I started becoming more confident, and things kind of worked out from there.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. It's not just the expectations on the other side, the hiring side, but also the expectations you have for yourself that needs to be adjusted. That makes sense. And I'll come back to you, too, for more tips. But Christy, let me come to you. So you have been in technology for more than 20 years. So how would you say the practices around women's recruitment and retention have evolved? And where does returnships fit into the picture?
Yeah, so 20 years, like, I'm definitely going to date myself. That's a long time, right? I can tell you for sure that I was one of the only women kind of in the space at the time. And so I just offer that to know that, like, it's not so bad anymore. And there's there's company out there, if you will. And I can tell you that organizations of all shapes and sizes are really starting to rethink kind of how we recruit, right? And it also becomes a very virtuous cycle in terms of how we retain. And gone are the days where we exclusively, as a large organization or even a small, like, hire somebody that we can actually deploy them to go work on a project right away, or go put them, I say, like, going right to the wolves, right? Like, the idea is we should be able to hire individuals that are curious about technology and curious to learn, but they know how to do project management. And by the way, if you're home caring for your children or for elders, or even just take some time away, like, I know that we've been doing project management and financial planning and great communications and conflict resolution skills. So, like, know that those are great tools, to the point that Josie said, like, think about what you're good at. And so I would say that we've started to evolve our thinking too, to hire for people that have great fundamental skills, and we can then train them to be proficient in some deep tech capability that, by the way, sometimes these skills aren't even available in schools these days, right? Like, I think about, like, machine learning and AI capabilities. It's not like you can go to every university on the sun and learn this. And so there's great beauty in organizations kind of opening their mind to understand that we can train people that are tech curious and just proficient humans to be able to be successful in this. I can also say that we have evolved, and it's taken us a little bit of time too at Deloitte to know that when we bring returners back into our workforce, that we need to make sure that their experience is unique to them, right? So somebody that's coming from another firm that's done the exact same thing is going to have a very different experience than somebody that's returning to the workforce. So how do we care and feed for their career in a unique way? That means we make sure that they get deployed to a shadow type of environment first, that they're not deployed by themselves, but they're there in an environment. And this is why it's a returnship, right? That you get the chance to learn and ask questions, and it's a safe place to fail and get feedback so that you get the opportunity to learn kind of on demand and at will. And I think that, like, I look forward to the day where this isn't kind of just a one-off, that this is inherently a part of all organizations and how they are scaling their workforce. And again, like, I keep talking about this time that we're living in, but it's really, really true, especially around technology. Like, there are so much demand for skill out there that you can't go to school for in a traditional way, that this is the only way we're going to meet the demands of the enterprise. And that's an enterprise if it's, you know, a large firm like Apple, or if it's like, you know, your neighbor's hairdresser's place, right? Like, everyone's going to need these skills. So it's if you've got passion or curiosity for it, there are jobs out there, and it's just a matter of understanding. And I'll tell you, like, I think that, actually, Christine, you probably have the numbers more than I would. Like, the number of organizations that are really adapting their recruiting and onboarding and retention programs to include returnships is just a fundamental piece of how they do business, continues to increase. Like, it's got to be upwards of 50%, if not greater now.
Yeah, I will say that right now. Yeah, well, right now, returnship programs are present at about 40% of the Fortune 50 companies, right? So it's certainly happening at big companies, but we're seeing it happen at little companies as well, or fast-growing startups and other places. So whereas it started as a really big company thing, it's expanding beyond that now too.
That stats are very, very encouraging to know. And Christy, I love what you said, that we can train people who are tech curious and proficient humans. I love that. That's the way to think about it. And Christine, now that I have you here, so let me ask a follow-up question to you. That what are the nuts and bolts of a successful returnship program? And really, why should organizations do that? Why not just hire a fresh graduate?
So those are two very distinct questions. Let me tackle the first one first, which is that, you know, a well-structured program, first of all, has to create specific space for the returners, right? You have to set aside headcount and a seat at the table and a specific job that people can apply to where they are not competing with the overall talent pool. And I think when Josie was describing her experience, that's what happened for her. She was now applying to jobs where everyone had a gap, and it leveled the playing field for her. We see some companies say they're open to returners or they welcome returners into events, but unless there's actual intent to hire and a headcount set aside, it's likely that managers will hire somebody who's in workforce today over a returner almost every time, right? So having that intent to hire and really giving a seat at the table to the returner specifically. And then the second thing is that they focus on changing how the people in the hiring positions think about who can be successful in their organizations and widening their lens. At Path Forward, we always say that the women aren't broken, the process is. And so we need to change that process and change how recruiters and hiring managers think about who can be successful in the organization. And we do a lot of that in returnship programs, and the best companies spend time making sure that they are ensuring that their folks are screening people in versus screening people out. And then the third thing I would say is support. And that goes for both the hiring managers and the teams that are bringing returners in. And supporting them with, you know, best practices around how to create good onboarding experiences for returners, and how to provide feedback during a returnship that's meaningful and focuses on learning and development for returners, and also support for the returners themselves, right? So that they have mentors and buddies within the organization, so that they have a community that they can rely on, both inside their company of the other returners there. But for Path Forward, we also have a broad community of people across companies who've been through returnship programs, who we deliver content and workshops to really help them recognize that while it feels like a very unique experience, they're not alone in that, and other people have gone down the same path and have learned some lessons that they're willing to share with them and help them be successful. So that's kind of what I think is important about the setup of programs. And your second question around why should employers do this? I'm going to come back to the women aren't broken. Just because you were out of the workforce for 2, 5, 10, God forbid, longer years, doesn't mean you've forgotten everything that you knew. It doesn't change anything about the fact that you have an aptitude for learning, a specific aptitude for languages and problem solving, right? All of these things continue to be true. In our audience, they have an average of 11 years of prior professional experience. Almost half of them have master's degrees, right? This is a talent pool that employers should want to look at. And particularly since the majority of returning folks are out for caregiving, and those tend to be women, bringing women back in at the mid-career and more senior levels in technology is critical for the industry. So it really is a true win for employers. And, employers should keep hiring new grads. They should keep running internship programs, but they should be running returnship programs alongside them so that they're bringing women into technology at all levels.
Yeah, and I'll just pile on, if you don't mind, that you said something very important, and I don't know the makeup of the audience, but we are hiring, organizations will always hire people from campus, and fundamentally, return programs are the exact same thing as a campus program. Not a lot of people come out of campus saying, oh my gosh, I know how to go work for the Bell Company, right? We fundamentally train people when they get their first job, and it's the exact same thing. Now, granted, it's a very unique situation because you're dealing with complexities at home. We want to make sure that people are cared and fed for, but the reality is, this is not new. Much as it's not new to have parental leave, right? Like in the US, we're lucky if some organizations have 6 months. Some countries like Germany have up to 3 years, right? That in and of itself is a returner type of program, as well as sabbaticals. So the mindset shift is not that significant in my mind. And I just think that as enterprises really think about it with that lens, it's very easy to adopt. That's me and my soapbox.
Great discussion. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. There were some great points there, both by Christy and Christine. So that's the kind of knowledge and information and uplifting information we would like to learn and share with our audience, that the opportunities are there. And let me get back to you also on some of the tips. But before that, Mariam, we mentioned caregiving and parental leave. You're from Pakistan, and thank you for joining us from Pakistan. It's 12 hours ahead of Pacific time, so it's past midnight there. So thank you for being here from that time zone. So in general, many women, especially in the Southeast Asia, India and Pakistan region, they take a career break for having and raising children. That's kind of the expectation that once you have children, they should have the priority. And no judgment there, of course, every culture has its own norms. But you joined the workforce after 10 years with 2 kids who have never seen you work before. And perhaps your husband is used to a certain way of living as well. So how did your family, husbands, and kids adjust to your returning to work?
Yeah, yes, women from South Asia are often, needed to take a career break to focus on their families. I've seen this firsthand, that women have left established careers to take care of their families, and sometimes they find it impossible to get back to work due to lack of opportunities or support. My family and my husband have fortunately been very, very supportive at every point in my life. So this was not a worry for me. My kids, though, yes, like you mentioned, they had never seen me work because I had taken a break before they came in. So their acceptance and their reaction was uncertain. It did take them some time, but they did accept the change eventually. I would like to, though, highlight that, I do say that my husband was supportive. He was. But, there are a few things that we had to work on together to make this experience a successful one. I mean, we had to make our schedule flexible. We had to, work together. Kids were home doing remote school online. So their schedule had to be kept in mind. So, we split our parenting responsibilities so that, one would either start earlier, the other would take care of the kids. And somehow the schedule and navigate, we made our schedules around both of our work and the kids so that we were able to navigate through this transition successfully. It's also probably important to mention that, for example, I was working for a remote team who was working in a slightly different time zone. So that made it easier for me to navigate through this process. Going back to office in person, I'm not sure if that would have been the same successful experience for me, because at home with the kids around me, I was able to do this transition better. But that was just like a personal experience.
Remote work certainly has its upsides.
Yeah.
Continuing on that, Mariam, so how can we encourage more women who may have been in your position to start looking around and look for opportunities and return to work? What can all of us, do better on that front?
I think bringing awareness amongst people is the key here. I mean, if people like me who are looking for a job or trying to navigate their way back to work, if they know that their career path is specially designed for them, the opportunity is specially made for them to return, it would definitely motivate them. Like I said, initially I did not know, so I was not not where to begin, how to re-enter. But once the path came in, that made me more confident, and it motivated me a lot more. So knowing that there are people out there in the industry like me, they're returners, and that it's okay to be one. It's just a career gap, it's just a career break, and it's not at the end of the career. That awareness and the opportunities available out there are going to make the difference.
Lovely. Josie, would love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, I think from the returnees' perspective, I think the first thing that we need to encourage is more of these kinds of sessions that we're doing right now. You're here listening to this and listening to stories. So find other ways to interact with other returnees and also update your skills by dipping your toes into meetups and things like that. It will start to give you a sense of confidence about where you're at, and you'll also start to get in the routine and out of that, what do I do phase. You'll have a plan forward. The other thing I suggest when you're looking for jobs is try to find people who are also looking for jobs, because even not returnships, just regular jobs, because what you'll find is that we all have fears. We all have anxiety and disappointment. And so you're not alone, and you can cut yourself some slack when you see someone who never took a break also going through the situations that you're going through, and you're giving yourself a hard time about that. The last thing I'll suggest is that you celebrate all your wins. Joining in this webinar today, that's your win today.
Beautifully said, and I love it how you said that. Planning ahead and giving yourself a break. Don't be too hard on yourself. Talking about planning, Christine, since you run and guide these programs and mentor students, mentor returners as well, let's talk about some very practical tips. So having that gap in the resume is very scary for a lot of us. What happened in those 10 years? So what could be some practical tips for the audience that how to best represent that resume gap in your resume? Maybe if you have 2 to 3 years of gap or gap from work, or maybe you have 10 plus years of gap on the resume, what could be some of the strategies? Christine, we can start from you.
Sure. So the first thing I will say, and this will be the opposite of what you've heard from somebody helping you with your resume, is don't try to hide your gap. It's very transparent when you put something on there that in my case would be Winston Consulting from, 2008 until 2021, right? They know what that is. I think it is much better to own your gap and to put something either in your summary or your objective or your cover letter that says, I am a, experienced software developer with 12 years of experience looking to return at a company or in the industry in this function after a 4-year break for family reasons, and leave it at that. You don't need to give them any more. You don't need to hide it. Just own your gap. That's one of the first things that that I would advise. And that's doubly true if you're applying for a returnship. Please make it easy for the recruiter recruiting for returnship positions to see that you have a gap. There's lots of times where we'll talk to recruiters running these programs and they're like, well, there's this person, but they have this thing and I can't tell if it's a job or not. And so make it easy for them to see that you have the gap when the gap is actually a requirement for the job. And then the second thing that I'll mention, and Josie alluded to this a little bit, but think about how and where you want to reskill. You don't have to make a massive investment in a new degree, but you do want to show that you have a love of learning, and you want to give yourself the confidence that you can learn new things. We've had returners who have done very formalized reskilling. We've had those who've just taken an online class. Others who went and, learned a little, read up on a new language and then tried to build something using it themselves and just built their confidence that way. But those experiences are something you can talk about that in an interview, to talk about, how you've helped to get yourself current. But again, it doesn't have to be going back to school and making a massive financial investment in a new degree because you already know a lot. What you want to show is that you're curious and that you can learn new things. And I will stop there and let Christy chime in and see what else she has to offer.
Yeah. So one thing that I think is important as you get prepared is just it's a lot, right? And I'd say one thing to minimize the anxiety here is realize it's a returnship, kind of coined after internship for a reason, right? This is just as much about you making sure that this is a good fit for you as it is for the organization that you're working with, right? It's a massive change for you to suddenly, if you've been with, especially we've all been with our kids. In fact, my kid just literally walked in the door. But this is about how do you make this adjust into your work? How do you make your work and your personal life really intersect in a meaningful way? And know that you're interviewing them during the interview process just as much as they're interviewing you. And you're figuring out if you want to be a part of this organization and if you fit into their culture just as much as they want you to come be a part of it. And so keep that as a number one level set. And with that as the backdrop, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to set expectations. And I say that don't be afraid to say, I'm not going to be here because my child has their first day of school on Monday and I'm going to come in late, but I'm going to make my time up. And how do I make that work? And just be clear on that. I can tell you anytime that I have been regardless of at what point in my career, when I've set expectations and said, being with my children and my family is far more important than being with my work. It is a game changer. I once left a client meeting with 100 clients to go fly home for my child's 11 years old. And I can't tell you how powerful that was because they saw me as who I was as a person. And it just set the expectations for conversations going forward. And it doesn't become uncomfortable to say, this is really about me, and I'm still here to support you as an organization, but this is who I am in my authentic self.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and more power to you for going back to your kids. Josie, would you like to share some tips?
Yeah, I was thinking, what you both have said about, owning where you're at. And with that in your resume, what I remember trying to write a resume that looked like I was up to date on my skills. And that just does not work because they will ask you questions. And if you knew that, 10 years ago, you need to review it. Whatever's on your resume, you should have some basic level of understanding. So what I did in my resume is I put categories of, basic level, medium level, or high level of understanding, and made sure that I knew enough of that, that I fit the questions that I could answer were in that level. So that's one thing that I think I'd recommend you doing. Also, really do point out that you took time off because you're taking care of, your family or whomever, but you're ready to come back and you are excited to start at any position. One of the things I did is try to start as a tester, and I actually did get a job, contract job as a tester, and it was manual testing. No developer wants to be doing that, but you do have to start somewhere. And then I was there and I learned from the developers, and my developer skills kind of shined through that. They thought I was the best tester ever. But that also led me into when I had my VMware interview, I could show them I was already doing something. So it wasn't like I just woke up one day and decided to go back. I was trying and I was doing manual testing. So do that. Open yourself up to other opportunities, not just what you've been doing, but other sides of technology or other sides of consulting that you've been doing, and you'll see more options out there for you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love the theme that emerged from all these great answers, that really it's not a break from hard work, it's just a break from paid work. So owning that gap is important. And let's keep the tips vibe going. So let's say someone is on our call right now, or maybe watching it on demand later on, and they are out of the job market for years and they want to get back in. What should they do right now, right after this call ends? Josie, let's start from you.
Yeah, so the first thing I would suggest is that you go clean up Instagram and Facebook, because I can tell you from first experiences, being a stay-at-home mom, I posted everything about my kid. And it's a bit overwhelming. You know, it's okay, but just make those private for your friends only. We talked about updating your resume. Make sure it matches your LinkedIn profile. And also point out that you've taken a gap and you're open to starting. Even mention returnship in there, and it'll open up companies that've never heard that concept to know more about it. The most important thing is tell as many people as you can that you're trying to get back out there, because you never know when a good connection will happen. Even if it's a support connection, those are crucial to get you through this phase into it. Then for developers, I would recommend picking up a book called Clean Code. That book is very small, very concise, and it just kind of inspired me and to be a better developer. And I know developers who are seniors who still recommend that book for people at their level. You know, we talked about coding and building projects and things like that. Really, I know it is so hard to get your mind around that, but I'll tell you one thing, setting up your development environment is not like it used to be. It takes 30 seconds to do it, which used to take maybe a couple of days back when I was at IBM. Now it's very easy and it'll blow your mind. So just go ahead and do it and try to code as much as possible. If you don't have a project that you can code right away, you might want to check out HackerRank, Code Wars, Codecademy, and Top Coder. They're online and you can create accounts and they learn with you and they give you problems in whatever language you choose. And they give you harder based on how you did, or a little bit easier based on, you know. The last thing I would say that you should definitely do is to attend tech seminars. Just go there. It gets you out there. You start to listen to the terminology again, and it'll make you more comfortable when you have to say it. I mean, don't do what I did. I called a curly brace a thingy the first week I was there, and they forgave me. But if you're out there and you have to talk about these things, working with other people, you just won't make that same mistake.
Thank you for sharing the tips, Josie. And I was laughing as you started by saying clean up your social media presence. That's very important. I was reading a report that says that 2 out of 3 recruiters actually scan for your social media presence by searching you on Google. So that is really important. Let's continue with the tips. Miriam?
Yes, I would second Josie on updating your resume. Link your LinkedIn profile onto that, and of course clean it up if required. But secondly, also to own your gap. I mean, like everybody else also mentioned, it's okay. We don't have to hide our gap on the resume. It's okay to have that gap. It's perfectly fine. And when we put it out there in the resume, when we talk to people about it, I think we'll find that people are more supportive than we actually expect them to be. It's not going to cause any problem. Other than that, I would like to mention that there are organizations and forums out there involved with this kind of work. Like I mentioned, the Pakistani Women in Computing group. Join that as a first step. You know, get to know people there, find out the opportunities, get yourself active in that. Secondly, I'd also stress the importance of networking. Engage in your network. That's also a very, very important step. But most of all, I'd say that find a mentor to guide you through all the steps, to keep you motivated, to keep you encouraged, because you're going to be going through a number of steps in the process of finding the job. And a mentor is going to be a great help in that. So finding a mentor is also very, very important.
Thank you. And before I turn to Christine, for our audience, please keep the questions coming. We already have a few, and we'll make sure to get through a few of them. And even if we can't go through all of them, we have the record, and we'll get back to you with some answers on that. And thank you, Suniti, for your shout out that you're finding this session very, very helpful. And yes, a recording will be available. All right, back to tips. Christine.
So the first tip I have for you is treat your job search like a job. Right? Do something every day. Put it in your calendar and treat it as you would have treated a meeting that you were committed to when you were in the workforce. And make sure you're investing in that time. And this tip may not be necessary for the people listening to this because you're already doing this to some extent, but find yourself some inspiration every day. And that can be by coming to an event like this. We have a ton of success stories on our site at pathforward.org to help you see other people who have done this successfully and know that you can too. And talk to your network. I think it's really important to just put yourself out there that you're looking. I remember for me, the biggest first step I took was stopping just thinking about maybe I should go back to work and actually articulating that to my friends and my former colleagues and saying, I'm thinking about it, because everybody wants to help. So definitely activate your network as well.
Yeah. I'll just add, because you guys have really, I think, done a lovely job, is, give yourself some space, right? And that means that this doesn't have to happen overnight. It's a journey, even getting back into the workforce too. So much like you would probably tell your children or a friend as well, like you might stumble a little bit along the way, or it doesn't have to happen every night, but do give it time and attention, but still take care of yourself. Because I can tell you that once you get back into, I can tell you this, not that I'm a returner, but coming back from leave and I have 2 little people, right? Like there's nothing worse than having 2 kids, or the complexity of life all at once is a lot. So give yourself some space, take care of yourself, make you number, like in your top 3 things of priorities. I'd love to say give yourself top billing, but I'd be lying. But your mental well-being and physical well-being is so, so important.
Mental well-being and physical well-being is very important, and that is one of the future topics we do plan on having a session on, that how to take care of our mental health while being in the tech industry. So there's a question from the audience, which is kind of very related to this discussion, that we have talked about various tips on how to get yourself ready, but really, how do you find returnship opportunities? Shall you just type returnships on Google and hit enter, or are there forums where you can go and see the jobs available? Anyone who would like to take that question?
I'll take this one.
Go ahead, Christine.
So if you Google returnships or returnship programs, one of the first results that will come up is Path Forward. We currently have 15 companies with 150 open returnship opportunities, many of them in the technology space. So if I may recommend that be your first stop, absolutely. There are other organizations that offer, and some companies that offer returnships that they market on their own. So by all means, that is a great way to do it, is to search for returnships or returnship programs. But we've aggregated a lot of them for you, so we hope we'll be your first stop.
I was just going to second that. Go to pathforward.com, or is it .org?
It's .org.
Yes,
yeah.
Pathforward.org.
Thank you for that. And Christine, on the same line, some people might be wondering that, okay, what really is the success rate of returnship programs? How many people who go into those programs actually get a full-time job? What has been your experience?
So we've worked with 90 employers on their programs, and the overall average across 600 graduates is 80% get converted into a full-time position at the end of the program. And because the next logical question is, what about the people who don't? I'll answer that for you proactively. Most of those people are able to find a full-time job much more quickly and much more easily after the returnship because they have current experience that they can talk about in the interview process. We just had a returner who was not converted through a returnship come into one of our alumni forums, and she said, the experience for me in terms of interviewing for full-time jobs before I found the returnship opportunities and the experience that I'm having now and the way that recruiters are responding to me with this recent experience is like night and day. And so I think that the confidence that it gives you that you've been in a company and doing great work and in your own abilities, I think really changes the nature of looking for a job afterwards. So for the vast majority, it turns into a job immediately. And for the others, it's really a great launching pad.
Christy, would you like to add something from your experience?
So I would also say that we talked a lot about returnships, and I also think that there are multiple flavors of returnships, right? So I mentioned a lot of times it is about you kind of test run with that organization. There are other organizations that will actually hire you or a student that you can train with, almost like a mini university, and then work with organizations then to place you, right? So I think about things that like Google is doing and even Salesforce, that they'll actually give you training and skills, and they're actually partnered with large organizations that are eager for you to be deployed. And so it's kind of like a train to hire too. And so know that there are multiple kind of flavors of this. And I guess don't limit your search to returnships online, but there are many paths, if you will, back into the workforce. And, really do open your mind. We've talked a lot about technology for some kind of obvious reasons, but the notion of this applies to many, many capabilities within the enterprise. So if you have a passion for something else, there's no time like the present to go chase what you're excited in. So, just embrace it. And the internet is your friend. So Google away.
Embrace it. Absolutely. And another audience question that falls somewhere between the advice of treating your job search as a job and taking care of your mental health, somewhere in between. So there's a lot of work that a returner has to do to prepare themselves, get their skills brushed up, update their resume. It might get daunting at times. So what is the best way to keep yourself motivated and positive through that process? Probably Miriam and Josie can share some tips.
Josie, would you like to go first?
No, go ahead.
It's not easy. I would say that. I mean, you have a family. You've been out. You're already, not very confident about yourself at times. So it's not easy. It becomes quite a challenge. But I'd say that, like Christine, I think mentioned, give yourself some space. Don't just put yourself through so much stress for it. I mean, treat it as a job. Do some part of it every day. That would be the way probably to move forward with it, because you have certain other responsibilities as well. So it's not like you put yourself into a deadline, that I'm starting the search today and I want to end up with a job by this time. You have to gradually work your way through it, depending on what are your dynamics at home, what kind of gap you are already facing, and that is the way forward.
I think also you have to have realistic expectations, right? Always have that, because if you think, oh, I can do this work in a week, maybe you could have, back when you were before you took the gap, but give yourself a break. You haven't been doing it. And I tell this story because it's really true. I couldn't type a semicolon, which is a repeated key that you have to do in Java. and literally the muscle memory in my fingers, where it was just gone. So I had to practice that and practice. And then I go in Kotlin, and you don't need semicolons for anything. So that was kind of, frustrating. But what I'm saying is you have to remember, the for loop, something so simple. It's going to take a little bit of time for you to remember. Do I identify it first, or do I set the value first? Just, keep doing it. And that's why it's important to code, because you can look at code all you want, but once you get into the actual program and actually code, that's when the muscle memory starts to come out. Your brain starts to make those connections. And it is so hard to make that step from reading to coding mentally. For me, at least, it was a mental blocker. But what I needed, what I noticed is that my kid was going to daycare still, but only like part-time. So it was skipping a day. And if I had a problem, I couldn't work on it for another 2 days if I didn't finish it. So you have to ask for support so that you can work the next day. Friends, family, whatever, to watch your kid, so you don't feel like you're not making any progress. So be attentive to your schedule and what you can do.
That's great advice. And talking about getting back the muscle memory and brushing up the skills. So I know Josie mentioned a few websites where you can go and practice your coding skills on various languages. It's a question again from audience for all of you. Are there any other things you recommend, like courses, websites, certifications that you recommend to other people or would recommend to other people who are looking for returnship opportunities?
So I'll answer that. And I would say, certifications are always going to be helpful, but they also should match kind of what your aspirations are, right? Like I wouldn't go get a certification in Salesforce, because I just mentioned that before. This is not a commercial for Salesforce, but like if you're not interested in being a CRM developer or working on that platform, I wouldn't chase that down, because you're just going to look back in a couple of years and be like, wow, that was not my a little bit of a waste of time. So, there are so many skills that are needed out there in the workforce now. I mean, I think about like, if I had to do it all over again, I would go learn so much more about machine learning and AI and data. And there are kind of discrete and acute courses that you can get smart on that really marry well into a program like a returnship. And I'd even say if the time is on your side, you can actually start to get some level of certifications now that you can get into programs or actually get into jobs at organizations that it's not even a returnship. It's truly just getting right back into the workforce doing that. And it's more of a kind of mid-career entry job. And so if you've got kind of time, appetite, and the financial means to do that, find skills, needs that organizations have that match your passions.
One thing that
I'm so glad you mentioned machine. Oh, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking when you were saying that about skills, and I'll give you something very specific for developers. Go out there, and if you're not familiar with Git, Git, go look that up, because that is everywhere now. And back when I was working at IBM, people were using it, but not as widely as it is now. And it's some form. Even if it's not specifically that, it's some form of it. So go out there and take a course, run the commands online, and so many tutorials out there that you can find.
The other thing I would say is I would approach this backwards. Don't go get a degree or take a class and then put your resume out there and see who's interested. Start from, what are you interested in working on? What trends are you seeing in the industry? What companies do you want to work for? And then start to go look at the job descriptions for the jobs you would want at those companies. What's required in those jobs? And hone your list of what you want to go learn based on that, so that you are kind of pointing your ship in the direction of the jobs that you ultimately want to have. So kind of take that top-down approach.
Yeah, yes, reverse engineering. Love it. Cool. We'll continue with questions, but for the audience, on your screen, you will see a link to a feedback form. It's a very brief feedback form, will not take more than 2 minutes, I know because I designed it, but that will really help us gauge how we are doing in our sessions, the topics, any future topics that you would like to learn more about. Please do fill out that form. I assure you, I read all of them, and that helps me make sure that we are getting topics and having speakers that you are really interested in listening from. Back to our panel. Okay, any final piece of advice for our audience? Let's start with Miriam.
Yes, I would say never stop dreaming. Career break is not the end of the world. If you're required to take a break for some reason, do that. I think you'll always come back stronger. Like Christy mentioned, that it's kind of a project management at home as well. You're taking care of your family or somebody else. There are a lot of more skills involved that you're working with, even if you're not working at a company and getting paid for it, you're still working. So you'll certainly come back stronger because you were able to take that break, and you were able to keep your focus on and your aspirations to restart your career. That just tells me that you were strong, and I don't see any reason why you're not going to be a successful returner in your career. So keep trying, and you're going to get there.
Josie?
Yeah, so I just want to say the last thing here is that I totally understand how scary this journey can be. Believe me, it was something that I thought, when that hiring manager ended my interview early, we still had 4 or 5 hours to go. I didn't think I was going to be able to keep going. So it is hard, but that'll make you work harder. And I have a feeling that I kind of want to email him and say thank you, because you actually helped me. And I got connected with Path Forward after that. So I know about a dozen people who have done this personally, and we are not better than you. We just have been through this, and we have had the right mentors, the right people around us to help us. So we all struggle with fear and insecurities, but we've all done it when we're given the opportunity, and you will too. And just keep focusing on the daily wins all the time.
Beautiful. Christy?
I know we're out of time. I would just say we've talked a little bit about networking. I'd say you've got 4 people that are in your network right now, and sorry everybody else, but if you want to LinkedIn with any of us, I am certain that we'd be more than happy to kind of help you and talk to you offline. Just know that it may not be immediate response, but we're absolutely all here for everybody.
Thank you so much for offering that. Absolutely. Christine?
I would just say have confidence in your abilities. You haven't forgotten everything that you knew before. You have not lost your skills. In fact, you've acquired new ones and new life experiences that will make you a better employee after your break. So be confident in what you know and what you can learn, and go for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christy, Christine, Josie, Miriam, for the last hour, and tons of good and useful advice. I know I learned quite a bit from that, and I know our audience would benefit as well. And thank you for all of those who joined us live, or if you're watching it on demand. Thank you for spending your time with us. Hopefully you found it worth your while, and keep a tab on our website on ACMWomen.com, Celebrating Technology Leaders, and we'll be having these sessions every 2 months. And as I said, the feedback form is right here. Let us know what you would like a discussion to be focused on. All right, and just finishing with the words that Miriam said, never stop dreaming. Thank you, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.